230.
וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול סלע באמת להודות לך ולייחדך באהבה ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה Adonai Echad, 232. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך 234 והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בהם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם במזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
Page 240.
כי כמוך באלים אדוני כי כמוך נדר הקודש נורא תהילות עושה פלא. Clap your hands. שירה חדשה שבחו גאולים לשמך על שפת הים יחד כולם הודו והבריחו והחלו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. Let us rise. סוד ישראל קומה בעזרת ישראל ופדחי נאומך יהודה וישראל קהלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
We come on page 242 to our tefillah, our Amidah, our central standing set of prayers. And in these prayers, in the first one, the Avot V'Imahot, we introduce ourselves to God by the merit of our ancestors. The idea being that regardless of what merit we may or may not have, we know that our ancestors had a bond with God, had a covenant, and we come to God saying, we're their descendants. Remember Abraham and Sarah. Remember Isaac and Rebekah. Remember Jacob and Leah and Rachel. And what this prayer does is it gets us in touch with the idea that we are in this long chain of generations. And many of our ancestors prayed these very words. And we're part of that flow in time. And we pray, we're also the ancestors of a whole next set of generations who are going to stretch out into the future, also praying these prayers. And today, as I said before, we're passing Torah to a new generation. We're in touch with this flow in time across us that we have a moment in. And on the third prayer, the Kiddusha prayer, we're going to conclude that prayer by talking about Ledor Vador. Canterbury's is going to sing Ledor Vador, from generation to generation. This idea that we all have a role to play in passing our tradition on to the next generation, our values, our learning. And so when we sing that, we're going to invite you out to sing it responsively. So you're going to hear Ledor Vador. We ask you to sing back Ledor Vador from generation to generation, back to each other we sing, reminding ourselves of our place in time and our responsibility in continuing the chain that we're a part of. 242.
שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Adonai, 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 244, Baruch Ata Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avoteinu ve'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor ve'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim ve'Koneh Hakol, ve'Zocher Chasadei Avot ve'Imahot, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. 246 אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיימת אימת הרב להושיע, מוריד הטל, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיימת עם ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר, מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיה המתים. 248 לקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך וכרזה אל זה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך כל הארץ כבודו. אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו, מאדיר שמך בכל הארץ, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. אחד הוא אלוהינו, הוא אבינו מלכנו, מושיענו והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו לעיני כל חי. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד עוד לך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד עוד לך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. We continue silently through page 261, using the words we find on these pages, the words we find within ourselves. And we've each finished our silent personal prayers. We may be seated. Page 250. ומלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עונג שבת. Why is he singing so softly? I wonder. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עונג שבת. So we have room to grow. מקדשי שבי שבת כולם ישמחו ויתענגו מטובך שבת ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עונג שבת ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עונג שבת והשביעי רצית בו וקידשתו שבת חמדת ימים אותו קראת שבת ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עונג שבת ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עונג שבת Lemase Bereshit. Oh, try that again. Come on, David. Zecher Lemase Bereshit Shabbat Mitvekes Yismechu B'malechutecha Shomrei Shabbat V'korei Oneg Shabbat Yismechu B'malechutecha Shomrei Shabbat V'korei Oneg, say Oneg. V'korei Oneg, say Oneg. V'korei Oneg Shabbat. What do you say when someone wants to express admiration and appreciation in the synagogue?
Because you might think that you'd applause.
I could tell some people were sorely tempted, and you were clapping earlier in time, which was great.
So clapping happens in a synagogue because clapping happens with the music, with the prayer. But actually, when someone does something you think is great, you say Yasher Koach. Try that. That's right. That's right.
Baruch tiyeh. That's what you say in
response.
response.
When someone says that to you, you say Baruch tiyeh or Brucha tiyeh if the person is a woman who said it. Little lesson there as we head into Seder Kriyat HaTorah. And I think we have no greetings and announcements this morning. So we're just going to head right into Seder Kriyat HaTorah. Are we ready, kind of, right there to...
Sounds good to me.
Want to tell who all the people are involved?
Great.
All right. So, opening the Ark, we're going to have Vivian's sister and cousin, Lucy Katz and Ezra Kaplan, and Izzy's aunt and cousin, Kathleen and Shane Levenson. And then once Izzy and Vivian have the Sifrei Torah in their arms and they're going to make their way around the sanctuary, the Torah scrolls, they are going to be followed by Vivian's going to be followed by her sister and cousin, Lucy Katz and Ezra Kaplan, and Izzy's going to be followed by her cousins and friend, Shane Levenson, Amanda and Tessie Katz, and Esme Ossenfort. So I ask everyone to turn to page 362. I need Vivian and Izzy with me, and I ask everyone to please rise.
Ein kamocha Elohim Adonai, ein kemase.
I need the Ark openers to come forward now.
Get ready. Al HaTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al gemilut chasadim. Al HaTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al gemilut chasadim. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
All right. We are reading this morning from Parshat Naso, which is in the book of Numbers. You're going to find, in addition to the Siddur that we've been pointing out, you're going to find a different kind of book in your pews. On the cover it says the Torah. And you're going to be looking at Numbers chapter 5, verse 5. That's where we're starting off. It's on page 925. That's where we're starting, 925. And we're going to be, as Vivian and Izzy and our wonderful teen, about to be high school graduate, Isaac Perkis, chants Torah, we're going to be inviting members of Vivian and Izzy's families up for the aliyot, the blessings that are chanted before and after each passage of Torah. And so first we're going to invite, Vivian's going to come up to start chanting. And we're going to invite her aunts and uncles, Ashley and Jason Englander Kaplan, Sarah and Ryan Kaplan, and Lynn Handel, to come forward for the aliyah.
יעמדו הבולים שבת המצווה הראשונה לעלייה לתורה.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach.
Baruch Adonai Mevorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Vaydaber Adonai al Moshe Lemor, daber al bnei Yisrael, ish o isha, ki ya'asu mikol ha'adam, lim'ol ma'al b'Adonai, ve'ashema ha'nefesh hahi, ve'hitvadu et hatatan, asher asu, leheshiv et hashamot berosho, v'hamishito Yosef alav, Benatan la asher asham lo.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam, nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Yasher koach. Now we're going to invite Vivian's parents, Brooke and David, to come up for this next aliyah.
יעמדו הבולים שבת המצווה הראשונה לעלייה לתורה.
Baruch et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, ve'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Ve'im ein la'ish go'el, leheshiv ha'asham elav, ha'asham el mushav la'Adonai la'kohen milevad, el ha'kipporim asher yichaper bo alav, v'chol teramav lechol kodeshei, b'nei Yisrael asher yakrivu la'kohen lo yiyeh, v'ishet kadeshav lo yiyu, Ve'ish asher yitin la'kohen lo yiyeh.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yasher koach. Yasher koach. We now prepare to call forward Vivian as a bat mitzvah by her Hebrew name, after which she'll take the corner of her beautiful new talit and touch the scroll, where she'll continue chanting before making the opening blessing. Tamor, 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 abachru bat mitzvah rishona, Bela bat malka v'David lali ala Torah, chazak ve'amat.
Et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai mevorach leolam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Vaydaber Adonai al Moshe laemor, daber el bnei Yisrael, ve'amarta aleichem, ish ki tiseh ish tov, o ma'alav o ma'al, ve'shachav ha'ish otav, shikvat zeret, ve'ne'elam me'inei isha, ve'hisra ve'hi nitma'a, ve'ed ein ba, ve'hi lo nitpasa, o avar alav rakin'ah, v'kinei et ishto v'hi nitma'a, o avar alav rakin'ah, v'kinei et ishto v'hi lo nitma'a, v'hevi ha'ish ishto el hakohen, v'hevi et korbana alecha, asirit haifa kemaksorim, lo yitzok alav shemen, v'lo tein alav levona, ki mincha kena'otu, mincha tzikaron, maskeret avon. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yasher koach. Yasher koach. Sounds like you've got some competition over here, Vivian.
All right, when we have the Torah in our midst, we pause in our Torah reading to draw on its strength, because for us the Torah is a tree of life, and we think about people we know who are reaching for life, people who need healing, people who are suffering, maybe of body, maybe of mind, of spirit, people who could benefit from us reaching out to them, to care for them. We're going to sing Mishaberach, which is in your prayer books on page 371, and then we're going to pause in the middle, and you're going to have a chance to say out loud any names of people you're praying for, anybody who needs healing, and then we'll conclude the prayer together.
Mekor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen.
We pray for the people we name now. pray together.
Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
We continue our Torah reading now at verse 23, chapter 5, verse 23. And we ask Isaac Perkis to come up and chant. And we invite Izzy's sister and parents for this aliyah. So Amelia and Catherine and Ken.
יעמדו על שבת המצווה השנית והחל עלייה לתורה.
Baruch hu et Adonai HaMavarach. Baruch et Adonai HaMavarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, ve'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. V'chatav et ha'alot ha'ela ha'kohen ba'sefer uvacha el mei hamarim ve'ishka et ha'isha et mei hamarim hamarim uva hamayim hamarim lemarim ve'yakach hakohen miyad ha'isha et mincha haknaot ve'heniv et hamincha lifnei Adonai v'hikriv ota el hamizbeach.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Now we invite Izzy to come up and chant Torah, and we're going to invite her cousins, Amanda and Tessie Katz, to come up for this aliyah.
תעמודנה הבנות דוד שבת המצווה השנית לעלייה לתורה.
המזבח בהר, ישקה את האישה את המים, ישקה את המים, והיצאים נטמעה, ותמעור מעור ואישה ובה המים המרים למרים, וצוות אבינה ונפלה, ירחה והיצא האישה לאלה בקרב אמה, ותים לא נטמעה האישה Torah hi v'niktav v'nizra zara.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
And now we prepare to call Izzy to Torah as a Bat Mitzvah by her Hebrew name. Tamor, 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 Abachor Bat Mitzvah Shinit, Nami Torah li, Bat Katun v'ken lali ala Torah, Chizki ve'imtzi.
Baruch et Adonai Hamarach.
Baruch Adonai Mevorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Zot Torah takenot asher tisatei isha tachet isha v'nima. O ish asher ta'avor alav rakina v'kinei et ishto v'hamid et ha'isha livnei Adonai v'asa la ha'kohen ha'torah hazot v'nikah ha'ish me'avon ha'isha ha'itisa et avona. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yishar
Yasher
koach.
koach. All right, we are ready to lift and dress our Torah. I'm going to invite Izzy's aunt, Lindy, or Lizzie's friend, Lindy Friedman, to come forward to help dress the Torah. And I will lift it. I ask everyone to please rise.
Page 370 in the prayer book. Vezot haTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai beyad Moshe. Clap your hands. Torah, 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 Torah. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Ora shake. It's on the lectern next to the microphone. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Please be seated. Except Izzy and Vivian, come on up. Izzy and Vivian together, come on up. Izzy, don't forget the Haftarah materials. It's time for Haftarah, which sounds like the Torah, except etymologically, it's different.
Different. It is a passage from the book of prophet, from the section of the Hebrew Bible of Nevi'im, which is the prophet. And each Torah portion is linked to a section, to a little section in the prophet that our rabbis saw a connection between. So you may want to look and Haftarah, what is the connection today? Why was this passage chosen to match with Shabbat Naso? We're in Judges chapter 13, starting at verse 2. You're going to look at page 947. Judges chapter 13, verse 2. And what we're doing here is we're watching Torah move through time. So we're watching the way that Torah is lived out and applied in different generations, because what's going to come next is that Izzy and Vivian are going to teach us about our time and how it connects to the time of the Torah. They're going to open with the opening blessing for Haftarah, then they're going to chant from Judges, and they're going to chant the closing blessing, and you may receive, I don't see it happening, but it's maybe going to happen soon. Yes, you did already. You may be receiving some little crinkly candies that you could choose to crinkle, crinkle, crinkle while they're chanting Haftarah, but you could also choose not to. You could hold it really close, carefully in your hand and not make noise with it. And what it's meant to do, I think maybe at the front people didn't receive. Okay, what it's meant to do is to create a gentle shower of sweetness upon our Bnot Mitzvah once they've completed the closing blessing after Haftarah.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. That's the F. Bachar b'nvi'im tovim v'ratzah v'divreihem hane'emarim ve'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah u'Moshe avdov u'Yisrael amo u'b'nei ha'emet. ויהי איש אחד משרה ממשפחת הדני ושמו מנוע ואשתו עקרה ולא ילדה וירחם אדוני אל האישה ויאמר אליה הננה את עקרה ולא ילדת הריד ילדת בן ואתה אישה אמרנה ואל תשתי יין ושחר ואל תאכלי כל טמא כי נהרה לילדת בן ומרה לא יעלה על ראשו כנזיר אלוהים יהיה הנער מן הבטן והוא יחל להושיע את ישראל מיד פלישתים. ויאמר מנוח אל אשתו בוא נמות כי אלוהים ראינו ותאמר לו אשתו לו חפץ אדוני להמיתנו לא לקח מידינו עולף ומנחה ולא הראנו את כל אילך וכעת לא השמיענו כזאת ותלד האישה בן ותקרא את שמו שמשון ויגדל הנער ויברכהו אדוני ותחל רוח אדוני לפעמו במחנה דן בין צרער ובין אשתאו. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam tzor kol haolamim tzadik bechol harot ha'el hane'eman ha'omer ve'oseh hamdaber u'mekayeh shechol devarav emevat tzedek al haTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al hanevim b'yom ha'shabbat hazeh shenatatan lanu Eloheinu לקדושה ולמנוחה לכבוד ותפארת על הכל אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לה ומברכים אותה יתברך שמה בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני
וברוך שמו
מקדש השבת
אמן סימן טוב ומזל טוב ומזל טוב וסימן טוב סימן טוב ומזל טוב ומזל טוב וסימן טוב סימן טוב ומזל טוב מזל טוב וסימן טוב ויהי לנו. Now pick it all up. יהי לנו יהי. We need some help. Come pick it up. ולכל ישראל יהי לנו יהי לנו ולכל ישראל יהי לנו יהי לנו ולכל ישראל יהי לנו יהי לנו ולכל ישראל סימן טוב
right, so as I said, we watch Torah move through time. We apply Torah in every generation. We grapple with Torah, we wrestle with Torah, and in this case, the focal point for both Vivian and Izzy is really difficult. If you were following along in the Torah commentary, you might have been troubled. They're troubled. And so part of what we do as Jews is we also wrestle. We wrestle with Torah. And so both Vivian and Izzy are wrestling with this parsha today, and they're going to give us their thoughts about it. And one thing that's interesting is that today is the first day for both of them to become a teacher among the people of Israel. Up until today, they've only been students. And today they are our teachers, and we are their students. And so no matter how old we are, no matter what our relationship is to them, we are listening. We are wanting to hear their words of Torah this morning.
Shabbat Shalom and good morning, everybody. Parshat Naso addresses priestly duties and the creation of the tabernacle, along with the topic of trust and commitment between married couples. More specifically, my parshat describes what happens when a husband suspects his wife of infidelity. He brings her to the priest, who conducts a ritual involving a potion and a spell to determine whether the wife was unfaithful. I wanted to dig deeper into the woman's role in the process, and from there, I questioned many parts of the text. During the ritual, the woman never shares her opinion. Why does she keep silent? If she was unfaithful, the spell becomes a curse that changes the woman's body in significant ways. Why does she relinquish control over her body? There are parts of Naso that I feel are very relevant to the present day, while other parts, like potions and curses, that seem ancient and disconnected from modern times. I believe the woman should have a voice in the matter. The husband is never advised to speak with his wife and discuss his concerns. He can accuse her without having to show much in the way of proof. She is forced through a humiliating ritual in which her body and fertility may be altered, and all the while she is silent. The ritual fails to address the underlying issue of trust between the two partners. The wife is forced to drink the bitter water and her head is uncovered. If she is guilty, she will experience shameful changes in her physical features. The wife speaks once, the only time we hear her voice during the whole ritual, when the priest instructs her to say, Amen, Amen. Even further, we don't know if she understands her predicament, for the text never mentions communication between her, the priest, and her own husband. Communication builds trust, and if a relationship has trust in its foundation, the partners can work out difficulties in other ways. In the Talmud, there's a story of a man who was so concerned his wife would deceive him that he locked her in their house whenever he was away. Rashi, a French rabbi from the 10th century, believed this was, quote, an improper act, causing hostility to come between them and leading her to deceive him. When a partner does not trust their spouse and cannot communicate, their relationship becomes unhealthy. While this is an ancient text, I feel that women are still struggling to make their voices heard today, around the world and in this country. According to the organization Represent Women, women make up approximately 50% of the population in the US, yet there has never been a female president, and women make up less than 28% of Congress. Women's voices should be valued because they are just as important as anyone else's. Women's voices need to be heard, and by speaking out, we are getting closer to achieving the equality that we fight for each and every day. Parshat Naso states that if the wife is guilty, a curse will be placed upon her body. I believe that women and everyone should have full control over their own bodies. The priest bears the woman's head, removing her modesty and publicly shaming her. He then forces her to consume water combined with soil and flour, referred to as bitter waters that induce the spell. If she is guilty, she is physically cursed and unable to bear children. Yet if she is innocent, she is gifted with fertility. Why is the ritual centered around the woman's body? It seems to me there are many ways partners could solve this type of problem, without someone being forced to relinquish control over their body. Women should have full control over their physical selves and the ability to make choices about their bodies without fear, violence, or coercion. In Ruth Bader Ginsburg's words, the decision whether or not to bear a child is central to a woman's life, to her well-being and dignity. It's a decision she must make for herself. Especially with the latest action on abortion and reproductive rights, it is of utmost importance to acknowledge that society should not decide for women whether or not to continue a pregnancy. Only the woman herself knows how they truly feel about such an important decision, and the power to end a pregnancy should fall in their hands only. The Torah explores the themes of trust and communication between relationships. Parshat Naso questions these foundations, removing a woman's voice and her control over her own body. It forces us to think about what was relevant back then as opposed to now. And while I may be slightly too young to be married, I recognize the value of trust in relationships with my friendships, with my family, and especially my younger sister. We've made a lot of progress in empowering women, but we still have a long way to go. This week's Parsha fails to ask the woman what she wants, yet it gives us a rare chance to strive to do better, to listen to women's voices and allow women to have freedom over their bodies and futures. To quote the women's rights and education activist Malala Yousafzai, I raise up my voice, not so that I can shout, but so that those without a voice can be heard. We cannot all succeed when half of us are held back. Shabbat Shalom and thank you.
Yasher Koach, Vivian. Yasher Koach. I'm looking forward to being able to respond to you, and first we're going to hear from Izzy.
Hi, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Raise your hand if you think men and women should have equal rights. Good. Okay. Well, my Torah portion is all about men being able to accuse their wives of cheating, but wives can't do that to their husbands. Imagine that, having your partner being able to march you around accusing you of things you didn't even do, and you can't do it back to them. The part of my Torah portion that I'm focusing on is the Sotah ritual, where women who are accused of cheating have to go in front of a priest to eat dirt, ink, and a bitter herb. If the woman is guilty, she will suffer a painful death. If she has studied Torah, the death will take some time, but she will show symptoms of death. Well, when I first read this, I was stunned. Then I was angry that this could happen. Then I had questions. One of my main questions was, how is this fair? Rabbi Bradley Shavit Artson at American Jewish University has an interesting perspective on it. He said men at this time always controlled women. The normal punishment for an accusation like adultery during this time was she would have been executed. The Torah is actually not as bad as that. The worst thing that will happen to her is that she will get punished by the Sotah ritual, but she won't die. What I thought when I first read this was, okay, that's bad, and obviously a lot worse than what is written in the Torah, but I like how in the Torah they made it better, so they got to survive. Yay. But when I thought about it a little more, I was thinking, why would the Torah hide the truth? Does the Torah want people to think the Sotah ritual was better than it actually was? Or was the Torah trying to put a better light on it in a good way? Because a lot of people will read the Torah, and kids especially, like when they become Bnot Mitzvah and are reading this parsha like I am. Does it not want us to get upset by this? Canadian Rabbi Roy Tenenbaum also has a take on this. He said, there is no such thing as magic. Trial by ordeal does not work. We know that, the rabbis know that, the Torah knows that. So what is the ritual of the Sotah all about? When the ritual is allowed to proceed to the end, the woman will always be found innocent. It is about establishing that the woman is innocent, whether or not she is, thus restoring trust between the partners and allowing the marriage to continue. I highly disagree with this, because even if there was a bond before the husband accused the wife, wouldn't it have been severed when the husband chooses not to trust his wife? And the wife would have to go through the pressure of being called out and being in front of a priest and people would start talking about her more. It's like in class, when you're called out by a teacher to say the answer, but you don't know it, and it's a pretty easy question. I mean, that could be embarrassing for anyone. And I know from experience that it is. The last poem I'm sharing today is also my favorite source, and it's a poem called I Am Accursed by cantor Lisa Levine. Accused out of jealousy, humiliated and tormented by the priest of my people. What is this curse brought on by my husband? I have done nothing. Nothing. Have I not always served him well? What is this bitter spell forced at me in rage? I drink of that potion, hoping for death. Instead, I love to be tormented again. This was my favorite because it was from a woman's point of view, as the Sotah ritual being about women and what they had to go through.
There are two parts to this poem. In the beginning, she is talking about how unfair it is and what she did to deserve this. The answer is nothing, because women should not have to be put through that. The second part is her talking about how she does deserve this and how she wishes for death. Well, the end was sad for me when I realized that women were brought up thinking that men are superior to them and whatever happens will always be their fault when it's not. As I read this to you, I'm becoming a woman. At the start of all this, if you asked me what the Sotar ritual was, I would have said that I had no idea. But learning about all this has given me a new respect for Jewish women. Coming into this, I thought I would just read the Torah and it would be over with. But reading these sections of Torah have really given me a lot to think about. I'm having a bat mitzvah. Where am I? I'm having a bat mitzvah. My sister and mom will both have bat mitzvahs. If I have daughters, they too will have bat mitzvahs. Out of all my female cousins, I will probably be the last to have a bat mitzvah. But if we look beyond that, generations ago, women did not have that chance. Their brothers did, their fathers did, and any male cousins would have all been able to have their large celebration. They might say they did not care, that they did not want to have a bat mitzvah, but honestly, if my sister got to have a big party with all her friends, but I did not get that, I would be pretty bummed out. When I first learned that until about 100 years ago, women could not have bat mitzvahs, I was stunned. And reading the Sotar ritual has made me even more stunned. And think about how far we've come. Of course, we still have far to go, but if you take a step back, you can look at what we have done and not what we haven't. This connects to the world today because of what's going on in the Supreme Court, where they want to outlaw abortion, claiming that abortion is killing babies. I think that is absolutely ridiculous, that no matter your gender, race, or religion, everyone deserves to have basic human rights. Everyone deserves to be heard. That's why I'm talking about this. For my Mitzvah project, I help raise money for rhinos, which are a very endangered species, which gets shot all the time for their horns. I stood up for them because I believe everyone deserves to be heard. So I speak for those who can't stand up for themselves. But what is the Sotar ritual really about? Control. Men back then thought they had to control women, otherwise they would get too strong and start to protest the unfair rules men would give them. They especially liked telling women what to do and what they could be. But women deserve to make their own decisions about what they want to do and what they want to be. And sometimes everyone just needs a small boost of courage to do what they believe in. Thank you, and Shabbat Shalom.
Yasher Koach, Izzy, Yasher Koach, Vivian. I have to tell you that I love and hate that you can relate to the women of the Torah. My whole career as a rabbi is dedicated to making the Torah relatable, to drawing parallels or at least connections between our lives and our world and the world of Torah. We're always asking Bnot Mitzvah to build a bridge between the words in the scroll and the world that they see around them, whether in our country or their family or their own lives. And it's often not easy to relate to life 2,500 years ago. The fact that you can in any way see yourself or our world in the ordeals of the women of 2,500 years ago means that not enough has changed. Hearing your two pieces reminded me of marching on Washington for reproductive rights in 1989. It reminded me of the 1972 Equal Rights Amendment, which failed and has never passed. All it said was that women and men were equal. It reminded me of Sojourner Truth and the Seneca Falls Convention and the Combahee River Collective and Bella Abzug and Geraldine Ferraro and Hillary Clinton's campaign for president against Donald Trump, which we all remember. And more recently, the Me Too movement and all the women who came forward to name abusers. I hate the fact that we're here and a new generation of 13-year-olds reading about societal abuse of women in the time of the Torah don't just say, wow, that was so backward, so patriarchal, so unequal, but also say, I kind of recognize that. Our world is different. We've come really far. And it's also not totally different. And also say, I'm afraid that men are going to make decisions about my body. And also say, a lot has changed and a lot has not. I want to live in a day when the Sota ritual is so remote from anything we know that none of us can relate to it. I'm even willing to relinquish my general plan of getting everyone to relate to everything for that. I want to remind us, as both of you did, that women's voices are not recorded in this episode and in a lot of Torah. We do not actually know how the women of the time responded to this ritual. We do not know what they were thinking because it's not recorded. It does not mean that they were not speaking. It's not recorded. We do not know what kind of resistance there might have been. We do not know what kind of power was invested in the ritual by the women subjected to it. It's possible they were terrorized by it, given that their status depended upon childbirth and child rearing. But it's also possible that they rolled their eyes at men's pathetic attempts to assuage other men's jealousies. We don't know. We don't know if they protested. We don't know if they undermined it in some subtle way that's not recorded. We don't know if they had an entire underground network to support each other through this ordeal. We don't know. I would like to imagine that they did. I would like to imagine that they were savvy and networked and had their own form of subversive power. So I went looking for any kind of hint like that in the text, any hidden sign to this effect. And I feel like I found one. Let's see if you agree. The waters that the women in the Sota ritual had to drink were called me marim, which mean bitter waters. But the word bitter in plural, marim, mem, resh, yud, mem, are the exact same letters in the exact same order, just with different vowels, and the vowels are not recorded in the Torah, as the most famous woman of the wilderness generation, Miriam. Not only that, but we know that Miriam was the provider of water. Famously, in Torah, Miriam was a prophet, and her special gift was that she brought water to the people whenever there wasn't water. And in other places, we have bitter water being turned sweet. So, I wonder whether, when the women came to drink the water, and it was called maybe it was called Me Miriam, it's possible, to them or whatever, that they were calling upon their sister in the wilderness, traveling with them, the most powerful woman of their time, who was a prophet, to sweeten this bitter water. And I wonder whether through this underground network that they supported each other through these ordeals of patriarchy, not just this one, but many. And I wonder whether they understood this drink to be protected by the prophet herself. In next week's portion, Miriam confronts Moses in an episode she gets punished for. And in that episode, one of the readings of that episode is that she is acting in solidarity with another woman, Moses' wife, Zipporah. She confronts Moses, who apparently has been staying separate from Zipporah so that he's always ready to be with God. And she says, aren't others of us also prophets? In other words, you're not the only one that God ever speaks to. Why are you separating from your wife when the rest of us manage to have a family life as well as being close to God? God does not like this. God punishes her. Certainly in the Peshat of the Torah, this is not considered a good action that she takes. But if we see it as another act of solidarity between women, this whole thing could start being a pattern. I like this reading. We do know, for sure, that 6 Torah portions later, the Torah actually names, by name, 5 women who stood up for women's rights, explicitly, directly, in the text, confronting Moses and all of the elders of the people at the tent of meeting in front of everybody, declaring that the laws as they stood were unjust. They successfully advocated to change the laws of inheritance, enabling women to inherit their own land, the land of their fathers, and potentially be free from men's domination. The Torah actually tells us that God agreed with them and said that they were right. It's one of the only times we see women acting in the Torah like this. And they do so with great courage, as you told us to, Izzy, that required courage, and that this moment requires courage. As terrible as it is that we have to fight for basic rights we've already won, we've already marched for, it's actually, in some sense, an opportunity and an honor to stand with the kind of courage that our ancestors stood with. Those of Torah and those of the last 2 millennia, or 3. Sometimes we will organize underground, creating networks like abortion funds and escort services and sanctuaries that get women across state lines for the services they need. And sometimes we'll march on Washington or get arrested at the Supreme Court. I probably will do that. Public things, like the daughters of Tzlofachad, the daughters who stood up 6 portions from now, to argue and win our rights in front of the whole community. Either way, we join with a long line of women who never gave up on each other and never gave up on equality and knew they deserved it, and we still do. May we continue to act with their courage and ours. May we never give up hope. May we continue to march with each other and organize with each other for the equality and the justice we all deserve. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Yishar Kochech.
We are ready to return the Torah to the Ark. And so I invite Vivian and Izzy to come join me and ask everyone to please rise.
Page 374. Ki lekach tov natati lachem torati al tazovu etz chaim hi lamachazikim ba Continue on page 586 at the bottom. Aleinu l'shabeach. Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adon hakol. Nateit gedula leyotzei breshit. Shelo asanu kegoyei ha'aratzot. Velo samanu kemishpechot ha'adama. Shelo sam chelkeinu kahen. Vegor aleinu kechol ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך
clap some more. Adonai Eloheinu, nekavel lecha, Adonai Eloheinu. Od meira v'tiferet uzecha, v'taken olam. Lirot meira v'tiferet uzecha, v'malchut Shaddai. Shaddai, Benemar, Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz, Hayom ha'u yeh Adonai echad, U'shemo echad, U'shemo. Please be seated.
We always finish our time together with memory, by pulling close the memories we have of people we love whom we've lost. And as Vivian and Izzy are celebrating on this day with their families, they're also calling close the memories of the loved ones who aren't here. Ethel and Lewis Davis, Bernice and Al Kaplan, Richard Johnson, Clinton and Betty Reese, and Vivian's family. And in Izzy's family, Arlene Levenson and Karen Avenoso. If this is Shiva for you, if you're in the first week since the death of someone you love, I invite you to rise and say that person's name out loud. If this is Shloshim for you, the first 30 days since the death of someone you love, I invite you to rise and tell us who you're remembering. If this is Shana, if you're in the first year since the death of someone you love, I invite you to rise and say that name out loud. If this is a yahrzeit for you, the anniversary of the death, I invite you to rise and tell us who you're remembering. We all rise in company with our mourners who are here in our midst. We remember these recent losses in our congregational community. Ilya Shleichov, father of Konstantin Brightman, father-in-law of Julia Brightman, and grandfather of Matthew and Ethan. And these yahrzeits. Reuben Abrams, Marjorie Alexander, Jesse Aaron, Louis Backrack, Anna Baker, Jonathan Bloom-Feshbach, Taylor Bowman, Ken Braderman, Max Brandenberger, Myrna Sines, David Clark, Arnold Doomy, Gerald Epps, Jenny Fogel, Therese Fox, Joseph Friedman, Jenny Schreiber-Gissis, Jack Goldner, Philip Goldstein, Ruth Goodman, Evelyn Grossman, Fred Hamburger, Julia Hamburger, Barry Hanks, Phyllis Heilbronn, Abraham Heller, Grace Hessman, Bernice Hirsch, Rabbi Norman Kahan, Sylvia Kappelmaster, Melvin Katz, Arthur Leeds, Eva Lipp, Fanny Lawrence, Rabbi Alexander Lyons, Ernestine Michaels, Morris Michaels, Herman Miller, Helen Millman, Samuel Minkoff, Patricia Olive, Jacob Oppenheimer, Samuel Pinkowski, Adele Roberts, Joseph Rubenstein, Martin Rubin, Rabbi Eugene Sack, Esther Sanders, Arnold Schmidt, Nettie Schoen, Esther Schwartz, Harry Silberglate, Joseph Singer, Charles Sturzer, May Waldman, Jerry Walpin, Elsie Wash, David Wash, Natalie Wash, Abner Abraham Waxman, Hannah Wertheimer, Barry Whetstone, Dorothy Zweig. I apologize, I believe that is the wrong list for this week. If you didn't hear your loved one's name, I know that you said it already, and if you did, we will say it at the appropriate time. If anyone else wants to say a name out loud, please feel free to do so now. We turn to the words of the Mourner's Kaddish on page 598. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divrach irutei ve'amlich malchutei. B'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael. Ba'galau v'zman kariv v'imru Amen.
Amen.
Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shmei d'kudesha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Da'amiran be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shemaya. Ve'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru Amen. May the one who makes peace in the high heavens make peace for all who mourn. And we say together, Amen.
Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru Amen. Let's clap some more. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru Amen. Ya la 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 la, go. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Louder. La 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 la, la 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 la, ya la 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 la, la 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 la. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru Amen. Let's hear it, everyone, now. We can do better. Come on. Ya la 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 ya la 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 ve'imru Amen. Ve'imru Amen.
Mazel tov to Vivian and to Izzy and to their family and friends. We're going to continue with Kiddush over here. If you're here for my class, it will happen right after Kiddush in my study. Shabbat Shalom to all.
Veshamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת. It's yours. לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם וביום השביעי שבת וינפש שבת וינפש שבת וינפש ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם על כן ברך אדוני את יום השבת ויקדשהו סברי ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא פרי הגפן ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם המוציא לחם מן הארץ Yes, have some.
When are you going to do kids?
It just happened. That was what